I personally forget that apples are a great way to decorate for the fall. So as I was looking on Pinterest, I seen some really beautiful pieces, but nothing that I was actually looking for. So I popped into Dollar Tree and seen these beautiful new galvanized buckets that have fresh apples on them, and then headed over to their little faux food section and grabbed a couple apples. I took my twine out and I glued a little bit onto the bottom of this basket. Now I do want to let you know that it is okay to start with the hot glue to get that twine on there, but definitely follow up with some tacky glue, like smush it in there if you want this to really hold, because that glue will pop right off with with the twine. So just keep that in mind, that that has happened to me in the past. Now people, don't have me perpetrating to you. If you have a large piece of styrofoam, please use that. Okay, you're gonna see me using this little baby joint and gluing it down, because that's what I had. You feel what I'm saying? But use the big piece. Okay, splurge. That's what I had. And then I'm using some of Dollar Tree's picks. I love the picks that have like the different florals, and they got the pumpkin, and they just look really high. Ooh, and they had this stuff. Have you came across this stuff? Didn't have a name. It just said $1.25, and it smells good. Okay. I cut that up. I put some in there, some little leaves. I covered up our styrofoam with some burlap. Pop those apples in here, and oh, I am so happy with this piece and how it turned out. What do you think? Something about all the fall things on top of this lantern just called me to it. I'm like, we can definitely dupe this using these beautiful wood pieces from Dollar Tree and a palette. We're gonna need a palette. I mean, you don't have to use a palette, but I'm gonna use a palette. And these little wood dowel pieces that are kind of like in a rectangular shape I pick up from Home Depot. You could absolutely use tumbling blocks for this section if you want to. I just had these dowels and thought it would be easier to have just one solid piece instead of having to put the tumbling blocks together. It just really took out a step. I then measured them to size to what I felt would make sense for the decor piece. You absolutely make this as large as you would like. I had some decorative trim pieces that I picked up from Home Depot in my stash and decided to cut them down to size to go in the front of these, just to add a little bit of a high-end decorative touch. Since I've been using this wood glue, clamping stuff together for like 30 minutes gives me a nice hold, and I'm able to keep on creating. So once they were dry, I then put a little bit of hot glue onto the bottom to get these to hold. However, when I was doing this one, I let it go and did not take into account that we still had the clamps on there. So people, here's why I chose the palette. It literally fits right on top of here just perfectly. The ends of these square dowels settle right in the nooks of where the palette is. It makes for a perfect flat top to this lantern, so we can attach a floral foam on here. If you want to put a normal lantern top, you go right ahead. This just made sense to me. I then took some of my wood glue and painted around all the creases on all the connection points, so this way we had a really good hold. I applied a little bit of weight to the top of it and then let this dry for 3 hours. You can paint this whatever color you would like or stain it. I'm using antique Waverly wax and a baby wipe and just applying a nice thin layer to the entire piece. The cool thing I felt about this build is since I used a palette on top, I could just take a little bit of tacky glue, put the floral foam on, and when that floral foam has served its purpose, I could easily shave it off and replace it as necessary. This way, this could be reused throughout the year as often as you would like, and you're not messing up a really nice top that you might have put on here, especially since we're not going to see it anyway. I don't always use the iron-on method, but when I do, and if I'm going to do it with fabric, you best believe I use some fabric Mod Podge. I had one of these plain wood rounds from Dollar Tree, and I'm like, this is totally perfect for this project. And I had this adorable fabric that I just picked up from Dollar Tree recently, a little shopping trip. That's right, the mushrooms are starting to grow on me. Now you're gonna need a lot of Mod Podge, whether you're doing napkin or whatever, you're gonna need a lot whenever you're doing the iron-on method. So I put a nice juicy layer on this wood piece of our fabric Mod Podge. I let it dry. It took about an hour and a half to completely dry to where I was comfortable ironing it. And now it's time to bring in the iron. People, if you're not familiar with the iron-on method and decoupage, it is one of the best ways to get a wrinkle-free look whenever you're trying to attach a napkin or fabric onto a surface. However, you need to use a lot of it because it has to dry, and then you're going to take a material, put on top of it, and use an iron to activate that medium to attach to your fabric or your napkin or paper, whatever, you know, whatever you're decoupaging. It just works really, really well. It kind of like melts in there, and it also gives a nice long-lasting hold. Now, if you have ever, and I mean ever, sanded fabric down, it is no easy task. So I decided to use scissors to trim around the edge. And I say this because this right here is an 80 grit piece of sandpaper. And I am just going around the edges here trying to get it off, just to share with you the difficulty that it takes some hand grip strength when you are trying to sand fabric down to make your edges look nice and smooth. So I just chopped mine down with some scissors. I added our little thankful piece on the front here, and it's absolutely adorable. Kirkland's has these beautiful chalky pumpkins with different colors and little gold stems, along with these harvest acorns. I thought, let's pop in Dollar Tree and see if we can't find something in here so we can dupe these high-end pieces on a budget. And as usual, Dollar Tree did not disappoint. It is that time of the year, so they had lots of fall items to choose from, and these already had little gold stems. So I just removed the tags off the bottom, and in the event that you struggle with that, I like to use my heat gun to warm up the tags, and then they just pop right off. Next, I grabbed some painter's tape and started piecing off the sections of the stem that we wanted to keep that gold-ish color. The other ones are kind of like a rose gold, but you guys know where I'm going with this. I wanted to section them off so we could keep that pretty color and then just paint the actual pumpkin pieces. If you want, you are welcome to cover over all three stems. I decided just to do two and then leave the acorn like this. The acorn we're going to paint white. We're going to paint one of the pumpkins blue and the other one green. These pieces are ceramic, but what they're painted with reminds me of like a metal finish. So whenever you're doing pieces like that, it's always a good idea to grab a paint that you know is going to work well with that surface. From experience, I know Waverly works really well with different surfaces, and if you're not familiar, you could use chalk paint or multi-surface, but just check the directions. They usually let you know. I knew that putting Waverly and mixing it with these acrylic paints was going to give me a nice hold as well as good coverage. It took me 2 coats to get these completely done, and then I just let them dry. And people, you would think it's smooth sailing from here, you know, just peel the painter's tape off to reveal a beautiful stem underneath. But oh no, to get to this, it probably took me the same amount of time to paint the pumpkins as removing this painter's tape. I don't know why it was so difficult. I mean, it was absolutely worth it. I think that touch of color on the pumpkin with that beautiful stem just really ties all of these pieces together. Love how these turned out. What do you guys think? Was filled with inspiration the second I seen this rustic pumpkin on Pinterest. So I grabbed this cabinet that I picked up at the resort for just $2. I thought this would be perfect. And I grabbed a paint stick. We'll need a paint stick. Well, not the whole paint stick. We'll need to bring on in the miter shears to just kind of, you know, nip that wonky edge right on off the painter stick, because we're not going to need that. We're just going to need this straight end right here. Since my piece is inspired, we're going to be creating a scarecrow, and I'm going to use these two colors right here to get my base for the scarecrow's face. Look, I'm rapping and rhyming over here. Anyhow, moving on. For the hat portion, I want to decoupage it, so I'm going to use this multi-surface for a base, and then I'm going to let everything dry. For the decoupage portion, I'm going to be using some TDS Rice Paper. This is A4 in size, and I'm going to call on some good old Mod Podge as our decoupage medium. Now, feel free to use whatever rice paper, whatever medium you would like. This is just what I'm going with for my inspired piece. Taking my little water bottle and giving a little spritzy spritz on the back. This just really helps to be able to manipulate the paper, minimize wrinkles, and then I'm just really going around the edge with some more of that medium, trimming off everything and making sure it's all in the right spots. I want to keep that rustic feel, so I'm grabbing my antique Waverly wax and a baby wipe and putting 2 layers right on this paint stick. And then I went over the decoupage portion. This was dry. I did make sure it was dry and put a nice layer over that. Once that was dry, I grabbed my Titebond wood glue and I applied our little paint stick, also using a little bit of hot glue. Our Pinterest piece had this little raven just propped up on the top of the hat. So I wanted to incorporate that into my inspired piece, and I grabbed this little mushroom I had from a pack I had picked up at Hobby Lobby a couple weeks back. I just trimmed this out in a few colors to keep that neutral rustic look carried out through the piece. People, I struggle with bows on a normal, but when I seen the messy bow on top of this one with the little button, I was like, I got this. I am capable of making messy bows. Plus, I have this awesome stash that was sent to me by a subscriber some time ago of amazing little fabric scraps. So I just grabbed one in there and started gluing things down. I did take our little mushroom and prop it up where I wanted it. Didn't glue it down just yet. I waited until I was done making the messy bow just to kind of measure everything out, get a feel for it. And I used tacky glue to apply all my fabric pieces right on top of each other. It's been my experience that tacky glue works extremely well whenever I'm using fabric and applying it to wood. I always get nervous whenever I gotta make a face of any kind, so I like to sketch that out before I start painting. And if you're anything like me and you never know what kind of face you want to put on something, just Google it. Google like scarecrow or pumpkin faces or whatever, and then pick one and like make your little tweaks to it to make it your own. Once I had the sketch down, I just grabbed my paint colors and I painted everything in. I decided that I wanted to put some lashes on the side of my scarecrow's eyes. This piece turned out so amazing. I absolutely love it just as much as I love the original. Such a cool way to upcycle some cabinet doors. I've been a fan of these tabletop hoop pieces for some time. They got the boho vibe going on, and Dollar Tree always has this 2-pack. Forget the fact that like one is missing. Okay. They have a 2-pack of these, usually at the store. We're going to use the large one in the pack for this project. Grab a base. Dollar Tree has a bunch of different options for you to choose from, and the wood pieces are actually pretty nice. Then it's time to bring on in your stapler. For a little bit of added stability, I decided to pop some wood glue in there and then attach both pieces. I went with a round base. I popped 3 staples in this joint and allowed it to dry before grabbing our floral bits. Now, I had some pieces from Hobby Lobby that I recently picked up for $1.49 and 99 cents, along with some Dollar Tree pieces. And I just kind of attached them with some hot glue, holding them into place. And then once that dried, I smushed some tacky glue in there for a long lasting hold. You could absolutely paint your hoop and base whatever color you would like, but I think for the fall season, this neutral was perfect. I have been really loving the arch decor lately. So when I seen these 2 pieces from Kirkland's, I'm like, Dollar Tree has some arch frames. We can absolutely try and dupe these pieces. But first thing you're going to notice here is that our frames are not wood. So I removed everything off the frames, including the glass pieces. So this way we could create a faux look, starting out with a white base. Now, it's important to make sure whatever paint you're using is plastic friendly. I know that this stuff works really well on plastic, so that's why I went with it. Feel free to use whatever type of paint works best for you. Starting with a white background, it's going to give us a nice clean base for our next step. Once your pieces are dry and they're mostly covered, grab you some antique Waverly wax and a paintbrush. Then put a nice coat on the frames. Now, I decided to paint just half the frame at a time, and that's because this stuff dries fairly quickly and you want to be able to wipe back some of that wax. You can use a paper towel for this. Be mindful if you are using a baby wipe, because you could end up wiping off that paint underneath of the antique Waverly wax. I did the same thing for the second frame and then let these dry. There are plenty of ways you could go about creating the inside, but I decided that I wanted to just take some rice paper and cut out sections to put inside the frames. You could absolutely use a napkin, or you could use decoupage paper, or you could use a stencil. There are so many different variations of this DIY that you could recreate. But I decided just to cut out a little section on a poster board so I had some stability on the back of my rice paper, and then plop it on in these beautiful faux wood frames. And I love how these turned out. Trays are perfect for seasonal decor. When I seen this piece, I was inspired to create something a little bit simpler using Dollar Tree's large wood planks that they came out with. Now, people, they are a little bit rough around the edges. It's going to require some elbow grease to get that off. I sanded all this down by hand. Took a couple minutes because it is really rough. But when you're done, it's so worth it, and then you're really ready to go. I grabbed some antique Waverly wax to use for our stain and a baby wipe to put a nice thin layer all over this piece. Our Kirkland's piece had some wood slats in it. Now, if you want that look, you would need to use several pieces, but I'm going to show you a way to use the stain and get a faux slat look right after this dries.
For the design in the center, I'm going to use a transfer. You could absolutely use your Cricut and print out a design if you have one. You could use a stencil. You could decoupage on here. There are so many different ways for you to be able to do that, but I'm going to use this Hello Autumn piece right here from this TDS Dry Rub On Transfer. Once I cut that out, I set it to the side and grabbed a little piece of cardboard so I could use that to create a straight line. Now, if you got a roller, people use a roller, but I'm just going to wing it and use what I had that was straight, that was closest to me, and cardboard it is. I'm sure you've seen people use a pencil, if not me, to create faux wood slats, but you can absolutely on wood take antique Waverly wax, a paintbrush, and a baby wipe to create faux wood slats as well. This is just going to look more organic, and if you just take a moment to blend the paint into the sides of the line that you're creating, it will look pretty amazing. Before you go applying a transfer or a decoupage or really anything onto antique Waverly wax, just give it a minute to sit and dry. I've used several different sealers to seal over these transfers, but for this particular project, I'm just going to use some dishwasher safe Mod Podge. This way, if anyone happens to be using that in an area that might get some water or it needs to get wiped off, it's going to protect the stain as well as the transfer. I grabbed some handles I had in my stash. I think I picked these joints up from Lowe's. They're like $1. They're really inexpensive, and I always keep them just because I think they look amazing as handles on pretty much any project. It's not an exact dupe, but I absolutely love this little inspiration piece, and if you want to put teeny tiny screws in your handles, you go right ahead. Just make sure they don't pop through the wood on the other side. I just glued mine down.
I am a sucker for a good rustic piece, and I love me some plate decor. So this little rustic rooster DIY, here we come. But only we're going to be using this adorable baby Highland cow that's in a bucket with some pumpkins. How cute is this napkin? And guess what? You get 4 designs on this. We're going to take a paintbrush with a little bit of water, and we're going to use that to trim along the design as exact as we possibly can to be able to put on our plate. Plus, it's a good way to kind of tear and fray the edges and get a pretty perfect and detailed trim. When I was happy with that, I then removed the sneaky layers that are on the back. So we just had the top decorative layer so we can decoupage onto our plate. This is a Dollar Tree charger, and I'm just putting a nice coat of white for a base behind the napkin. For the medium, I'm gonna use some of DIY's liquid patina. I get this from Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Designs. For anyone that's interested, I keep a link down in the description box. Before I start to decoupage this, I'm going to trim it up just a little bit more to match the shape of the inside of this plate. And this is a complete preference. You can leave as much of the napkin on there as you would like. When you're completely happy with how you need to trim down your piece, it's a good idea to kind of size up exactly where you want it. Use one of your hands to hold it in place, fold it over, put a little bit of your medium there, and then press it down exactly where you want it. So this way you don't have it moving and possibly putting it on crooked. Another little tip, whenever you're decoupaging, grab yourself a kitchen sponge. I picked these up in a pack from Walmart. I love using them to be able to just press directly down on top of the napkin. It kind of soaks up any of that extra medium through the pores of the napkin, helping to reduce any wrinkles. Now that your piece is in place, you just continue to do the same thing until the entire napkin is attached. I like to say less is more, especially with the medium. It helps to reduce wrinkles, but you do you and what works best for you. This is just what works best for me. I let this dry for a few hours, and now we're going to kind of turn this what looks like wood into a deeper wood by adding some antique Waverly wax. Just taking a little bit on my finger and kind of smearing it around the napkin. This is going to cover up that white that we painted on there, so it's not so, creating that separation, and it's going to blend the napkin into the plate. It's also going to give us that wood plate appearance. Now, I did spend about 30 minutes using a baby wipe, a paper towel, and my finger blending everything together and going over the plate to get that deep wood look that our piece from Pinterest had. When I was happy enough with the wood color we had, I took a little bit of cream paint and I went over the napkin around the edges and onto the dark antique wax we had around the napkin, just to kind of blend everything in a little bit more, showing through with some of those wood grains in this plate. To create a little pocket on the front, I just cut up some burlap and frayed it around the edges, and I used some tacky glue and hot glue to attach it down. At the top of the plate, I made a little messy bow with some scrap pieces of fabric that were sent to me some time ago by a subscriber, and I just kind of layered them on top of one another and absolutely adore how this beautiful rustic plate turned out. I was so inspired to recreate this apple seasonal decor piece I found on Pinterest. So I popped on into Dollar Tree and over to their little faux food section to grab some apples. I feel like you could recreate this so many different ways. I personally had this bowl that was pretty spot on to the piece on Pinterest. So I just grabbed some moss, tossed it on in here. I didn't glue anything down, arranged the apples right on top of it so they didn't fall out. And I love how simple this is. But if you don't have one of these at home, Dollar Tree has these cool wood plaques. They also have bowls there, but I just tossed it upside down, threw some of that moss right on top. You could absolutely stain yours if you want to. Place them on here again without gluing anything down. This way you can remake it using whatever faux food you would like. And I love how this one turned out as well. I'm always amazed at how a Pinterest piece can inspire you to create something that's not exactly like what you see. For example, they gave me an idea for these cool new Dollar Tree ceramic pieces. And people, did you know these little tea light pieces from Dollar Tree fit perfectly right in the top? Now check this out. All we're gonna do is pick a paint color and paint these suckers up. I went with green because I feel like it goes with fall, I feel like it goes with Christmas, and I feel like it kind of goes with everyday decor. Let that dry. You can put a sealer over it if you want. And there are so many different ways you can remix this idea, starting with this one. Just add some tea lights. You can pop some regular candles in here. Completely up to you. For this next one, you can switch up the type of candle that you want to put in there and add some raffia in there with some florals. You can keep it super simple with just tying a little bit of rope twine around your piece, or get a little bit extra, pop in a piece of floral foam, and put in some of your favorite seasonal accents. Oh, how I love some simple, easy, high-end looking DIYs, especially when it comes to glass pieces. Dollar Tree has a bunch of glass pieces to choose from, but I thought this one resembled our Kirkland's piece pretty well, at least when it comes to the overall shape of it. Now, it did have this little glass rim, which you're really not going to see once we put some twine on there. You're welcome to glue your twine on, but I like to save money and I make a lot of these videos, so I didn't want to glue this twine on here in case I wanted to take it off. So a little tip is just to tie it on there, and then when you get to the very end, you leave yourself enough room that you can just loop that twine underneath the existing loop, and then you pull it tight. This is going to give you the ability to just take that sucker right on off and then reuse it as the season goes on, as the next project comes along. And yes, I know it's only $1.25, but some days every penny counts. And then I just trim the excess off around the twine. I know some of y'all like to burn it. I don't trust myself with fire. I leave that to the adults. Now you can put any type of floral you want in here. I'm gonna give you a couple options in the reveal, but for the seasons as they come along, this is simple, elegant, and beautiful. West Elm has some beautiful high-end wall decor. This piece in particular, I felt like we could recreate for just 2 Dollar Tree canvases. Use whatever size you would like. I'm gonna use 2 of the 8x10s. If you want to remove each one of the itty bitty little staples on the back of these canvases, you go right ahead. I avoid it like the plague because I have hand grip strength issues, and I've done enough of these types of projects over the years to know that my stapler remover is a pain to hold in my hand and remove each one of them staples. So I get a box cutter, I go around them, and then I trim out the corners. It's time consuming, it's a pain in the booty, but it's way easier on my hands for the long run. Once I got the canvases removed, I trimmed them down to size to fit just inside of our wood frames. Use whatever color you would like. I decided to go with my antique Waverly wax in the moss color and apply a nice coat right to the center. For the little greenery piece, we're going to take some of Waverly's plaster, that's the color, it's called plaster, and we're going to take a thinner paintbrush and paint them right on in here. When you're all done painting your pieces, it's time to bring on in the stapler and attach your canvases. Make sure you take a second sizing up the canvas so it's in the center before you start stapling your piece together. How simple and elegant is this glass fall piece I found on Pinterest? I love how the twine just adds a little something to the glass. I want to use some of my thrifted pieces, some of my Dollar Tree pieces, and some of my upcycled pieces to take this one idea and create an awesome cohesive collection using some twine. And not only do I want to share how we can take different bottles from thrift stores, from our upcycled stash, from Dollar Tree, and use some twine to tie them all together to make a bunch of decor, I want to also show you how you can reuse these even after we DIY them. simply by not gluing anything onto your glass. First, just tie a knot like this with your twine and then hold it in place and start wrapping. Wrap whatever design or whatever way and in whatever spot you would like on your glass pieces. When you get to the end, you're gonna take your hot glue and you're gonna apply it onto the twine, not onto the glass. And this includes if you're adding fabric, if you're adding burlap, if you're adding florals, just glue it onto the twine. You can even nestle your floral pieces like I am here underneath of your twine and wrap it in and then glue it. This way, as the seasons go on throughout the year or your style changes, you get tired of looking at these, grab them suckers from wherever you got them around your house and just cut the twine off. Then you have fresh blank glass pieces you didn't have to spend any more money on or any more time scrubbing food pieces you decided to upcycle, and just put new crafty ideas onto pieces you already had. Even if you want to use some fabric, you do not have to attach it to the glass. You just wrap it nice and snugly around the glass, make sure it is tight, then take a little bit of that glue, put it on the fabric itself, press it down until you notice that it is attached, and then grab some of that twine, tie a little knot just like we did with the other ones, and then repeat the process. You'll be able to remove this just like you are without the fabric. And then once you have your fabric on here, your twine on here, you can take any accents, any floral pieces you would like, and just attach everything to your twine. I love how one Pinterest inspired piece can create so many different ideas. How adorable is this tiny wood scarecrow I found on Pinterest? We're going to recreate our own version, just a little bit bigger. I got some scrap wood pieces. One's a little piece of trim. I got this piece from Dollar Tree. I think it's MDF. I don't really think it's a piece of wood, but we're going to paint them on up using pretty much the same color palette as our Pinterest piece. Absolutely use whatever color choices work best for you. I really like the color choices that were already on this scarecrow. I did decide to sand down the head portion and the body portion, and if the booty portion was wood, I would have did that too, but I left that as it was. I picked up these little scarecrow hats at the beginning of the season from Dollar Tree. I figured these would be just perfect for this project. Now, I did sketch these eyes out. It's hard to see, even though I'm like tracing them with this black permanent marker and coloring them in. And yeah, it's still, I'm staring at it like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't like these eyes. They're creepy. I carried on just making like a squiggly smile and figure at some point I'll fix the eyes. So moving on, you know, as crafters and DIYers do, I grabbed my orange paint and I started painting the nose on. Like, all this little carrot's turning out so cute. Just, you know, filling it all in, giving it some shape, you know, giving it some character. And then I'm like, you know, I don't really remember this looking like a snowman's face. I just looked at the picture and the nose is like a candy corn. Lucky for me, I had some baby wipes and we can just wash it right off. Listen. Sometimes my brain just does whatever it wants, okay? It don't care what Pinterest piece I'm trying to do. When I was done with the face, I grabbed some TDS transfers and cut out the little fall piece and one of the little pumpkins. I wanted to just put this right on down on the bootay portion of our scarecrow. On the chest portion of the Pinterest piece, there was like a little patch on there with some burlap. So I cut out a little square and a little piece of fabric and attached one. I glued down our hat with some wood glue and some hot glue, and then used the same to attach all the pieces together, and this turned out so amazing. I absolutely adored all the denim pocket decor pieces I seen on Pinterest, but my favorite one was this decoupaged one. So I wanted to start with a Dollar Tree base, and these are pretty popular right now at Dollar Tree. So to cover up the back, I just grabbed some of this vinyl that I had in my stash. And you would not think that it's as difficult as it is to line up some vinyl. But people, I'm here to tell you that it is. Because not only is it constantly sticking when I'm trying to lay it down, but then I had it crooked. It took me, I was like, I should have just left the whole back. I should have just left it as it was. And I mean, just when I thought that I had it on there straight, as I was laying it down, it was still crooked. For the love of vinyl, what is wrong with you? Just straighten. Whew. And I really just want to say, like, this is not necessary. If you're going to resell your piece, absolutely cover the back. I don't know what I was trying to prove here other than making me want to quit. And then the staples on the front, trying to get them out because I wanted to use the back, that was not any easier. Eventually, I got it all taken care of, and then we were able to move on to actually creating the project. I'm going to start off with some white paint and just put a base coat down. While that's drying, you got to find some jeans, people. We need our denim pockets. Don't you worry about whose jeans these are. And no, they are not mine. We're going to need to poke a little hole in the... we're going to need to cut a hole... I don't think anyway. See, that's going to be good. Cut the pocket out. Okay. Cut the pocket. Look at that. You can leave as much of the denim around the pocket as you want. I decided to trim mine down pretty precisely. And then I took my fingernail and kind of went over the edges to fray it just a little bit. For our decoupage portion, we're going to be using this beautiful napkin right here. Now, I've decoupaged a lot of things and I've decoupaged fabrics before. The only thing I personally will use on fabric is a napkin. It just works best for me. I've tried tissue paper, I've tried gift wrap paper. This is just my, and fabric on fabric, obviously. But for this particular project, we're going to use this napkin, and you're going to want to remove any of the sneaky layers. Just have that top decorative layer. And please keep in mind, you're going to want to make sure that your medium is meant for fabric. Now I want to take and put a little bit of a base on here. This way the design on the napkin pops and we don't have that blue hue coming through completely through the napkin from the denim on the jeans. For our medium, I'm going to be just using some good old Mod Podge here. This is the fabric formula. And if you've never used it, people, it's super thick. And you're going to want to put this on super thick. I recommend just doing small sections. Keep it simple. Don't get wild and do the whole thing. Press the piece down exactly where you want. And I like to take a little sponge. This is a dry sponge. I get these in packs from Walmart, and then I will cut them down to size and press them into place. This will absorb up excess Mod Podge, and it also just kind of presses them down exactly how I want them so I can continue to decoupage with minimal wrinkles. While that's off drying, I grabbed one of Dollar Tree's trays to draw us some straight lines with some antique Waverly wax and a paintbrush to create faux wood slats on our background. I also took a little bit of antique Waverly wax on a baby wipe and helped to blend things together to give us that faux wood slat appearance. When I was happy with that, I grabbed some tacky glue and some hot glue to apply our little pocket onto our piece. When everything was dry, I took a little bit of that antique Waverly wax on a dry brush and just kind of blended things in a little bit more all around the edges. Then I started adding some accents. Now I know those of you that struggle to find the Dollar Tree ribbon are gonna be a little upset with me for this one, and I'm sorry, but you'll see in the end reveal that it was absolutely necessary for us to bring on in the stapler so we could attach this ribbon onto the top for a beautiful hanger and a little accent in the center of our bow. Put whatever you would like in your pocket and then hang it wherever you would like. I absolutely love how this beautiful little rustic piece turned out, and it looks just perfect on the front door. I have been in love with cohesive collections lately, and West Elm had these gorgeous wood gallery frames and metal gallery frames. So I ran on over to Dollar Tree and grabbed some canvases in different sizes. I knew we could dupe these for so much less. There are a bunch of ways that you could recreate some floating frames, but I felt like one of the easiest was just going to take these canvases, remove the front of the canvas, and then glue the front of the suckers onto the back. I know it sounds confusing. It'll make sense in a minute, I promise. Just roll on with me. Trust me, cut the front of those canvases off. And then go on to Canva and pick you out some images. These were in color. I just turned them black and white and I printed them out on regular paper. And then I cut down the canvases to fit just on the outside of the wood frames so we can attach them. Then I trimmed down our images we had printed so that way they will go right in the center of the canvases that we're gonna attach to our wood frames. Now people, at this point, if you want to use some glue to attach these, you go right ahead. I never skip out on an opportunity to decoupage something, so I grab my good old Mod Podge here and use that to apply and attach our photos right onto the canvas pieces. Let them dry for an hour, and then it's time to bring on in the stapler because we need to reattach these, and staples always work the best for me, in my opinion, reattaching that canvas onto the wood frame. The best part about this West Elm wood dupe is being able to customize it to match whatever you have going on in your home. And even better, we were able to make it for just a couple dollars. When I seen this adorable little piece, I'm like, I know what we're gonna do here. Bring in some of Dollar Tree's wood pellets. These are one of my favorite things to make wood DIYs with at Dollar Tree. And yes, I know Dollar Tree has scrap wood. I could have totally grabbed one, people. I could have and made you a nice little wood block, but you don't really want to be bored with exact dupes, do you? I like to make Pinterest inspired dupe pieces. Well, really inspired dupe anything. I also decided to get a little wild here and take some of this Key West to another palette. So this way we had 2 pumpkins instead of just 1. This idea was just too cute for me to just make you 1 orange pumpkin, okay? I had this large stencil that looks like a camera. Pretty cool, right? With different little shapes and, you know, flowers on it, and decided that I'm going to use different sections of our stencil to create different little spots of stenciling on our palettes. And I also decided that I was going to have the palette pumpkins going 2 different ways, 1 long ways and 1 wide ways. That way, how you say it? Tall, short, fat. You know what I mean? If you're not that great at stencils, I do have a how-to stencil tutorial. I can pop that down in the description box for you to check out. But what's most important is mainly your loading and offloading. If you make sure you get a lot of paint on your brush, and I'm using a stippling brush for this, and then get most of it off to where it's a dry brush, you can really avoid any bleed through underneath your stencil. I had some of these little branch bits that came in a pack from Dollar Tree from last year. Just stuck them right on the top of these. Making banners is not something I do very frequently, so suck this one on in, people. You're gonna need a book, and I got a pretty big one from Dollar Tree, and some leaves. I grabbed these. You could use, of course, whatever ones you want. And we're gonna start this off by just ripping out some book pages. If you're a book lover, this might be a little hard for you, okay? It might be a little hard, so just, you know, close your eyes. Look at how nice these gems turned out. That's right, I can clean up some paper, people. Nice and fancy schmancy. And now we're just gonna cut, like, you know, little, what do you guys call these? Dovetails at the bottom. So, you know, they mimic our Pinterest dupe that we're creating here. I do want to say that for crafter's sake, I just used hot glue to attach our little burlap leaves onto our paper. However, if you go to create this at home, I highly recommend tacky glue and hot glue. I was on a crunch for time this week. I have a lot going on. So I just used some hot glue. I figured you guys would understand and love me anyway. And if you're not familiar with me and you're just coming in and you're like, why is she even saying that? Because I am a huge stickler for, even though we're just crafting and DIYing, I love to teach you guys the best way possible to get long lasting holds in the event that you're selling or gifting people things. You don't want your crafts and DIYs to fall apart once they get them. If you do add the tacky glue on here, be mindful to put this stuff off to the side and let it dry for a few hours before you attach it to your rope, or in my case, we're going to use some of Dollar Tree's ribbon. People, I wasn't even ready to sit and try and rub 2 brain cells together to figure out how I was going to get this paper on here adequately enough. I guess I could have wrapped the top around and glued the bottom, but I was like, nah, that's too much work. Instead, let's bring in the mini stapler. Look at that. Look at the mini stapler making a little appearance. I know, yeah, it's a small stapler, okay? But it'll get the job done. Are you guys judging my mini stapler? There's nothing wrong with it, okay? Size doesn't matter. It's the way the product, I'm so sorry. It's the way that the staples go into our decor, okay? That's all that matters. I'm so sorry. Like, if your kids are watching, just cancel me now. Anyhow, I stapled these in because I felt like that was just going to be the quickest thing for me to really get these attached and make sure that the paper wasn't going to fall off. But if I was using the rope, it would probably have been best for me to wrap the top of the paper around, then glue the bottom. With this, I could have added another little piece because you're going to see the staples kind of shine through. Now, if you're hanging it up and you're putting like swag and stuff like that over it, you're not going to notice the staples. Popping this in here is going to definitely secure your little banner from, you know, falling apart. I really like using staples when I'm doing stuff like this. It just kind of like takes the stress off my mind when I'm doing fabric and attaching other pieces to fabric, because I don't use, you know, a sewing machine and stuff like that. I can do like hand sewing, but really I don't want to do all that. Like I really just don't. So this is just quicker for me. And if you don't like the staples shining through, grab an extra little piece of ribbon or rope and just glue it right on the top there. This is one of my favorite fall theme wood rounds that I found on Pinterest, and I'm like, Dollar Tree has these new wood rounds I can kind of incorporate into this. I have an awesome idea for this piece. And we're going to need some popsicle sticks to create our little, you know, our little wood banner thing. And let's not forget our napkin, because, you know, we need a napkin on this joint. Now, I didn't have a Hello Fall, but I did have a harvest. Okay, I did have a harvest. So I'm like, we're going to just use this. First things first, I had to make sure that I put our little popsicle sticks in the right place and make sure that they were large enough that they were going to accommodate the size of our word here. So I took a little painter stick and just measured things up, put a little line where it made sense at the bottom, and then I did the same exact thing for the top. If you have never decoupaged a napkin, it's always important to get those sneaky layers off your napkin, because you want to just use the top decorative layer. It is really hard to get Mod Podge to attach through any sneaky layers to hold on our decorative layer. It can be done. Oh, it can be done, but it's a little tiresome. People, there is such a detailed section around the bottom here. I'm taking a little bit of water on a paintbrush, and we are going around tracing that lasered pop out of the pumpkins and then pressing it down to separate the napkin to just allow us a shape that fits perfectly around our pumpkins. I'm not gonna lie, this is gonna require some patience, all right? I might be making it look easy, but we're at 6 times speed here. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say about that. When I was done with the bottom section, I then drew a line right where our print flipped upside down. So this way I could have that meet up with where our little popsicle sticks are gonna go, and then I could flip it right side up so we could use this portion at the very top of our wood round here. When I was happy with those, I just kind of tossed them to the side because they got to dry anyway before we can go Mod Podging them up. They had water all on them. And I painted the inside of the pumpkins. Now this was the only one that really popped out, so it was super easy to just kind of stay in the little laser cut and paint our pieces. The other two, not so much. I also made sure to kind of add a little bit of shading, and you can skip that step. Like if you don't want to add shading, obviously don't add shading. I just decided to pop a little bit in there because why not? I already spent several hours painting another pumpkin this day. Well, not several hours painting, but you know, it's too much time on one project. However, I thought these turned out pretty good. I was really happy with the end result here. I was like, this is nice. To apply our napkin, I'm just going to use some matte Mod Podge and a fan brush. I like to use fan brushes whenever I'm using a napkin because they're super thin at the tip, and it allows me to really smoosh them in there when there's sections that are attached and there's not. First, though, I had to take this tiny little piece to really get in around these crevices to meet up with the fan brush. So this way I didn't get Mod Podge all over the sections that I didn't want it. So we didn't have napkin bits attached all over on the pumpkin where we didn't want it. So this was a little tedious because I also like to make sure that my sections of my napkins meet up before I start applying another section of the napkin. So I had to create like
this line that made sense to me where I was going to stop and then start again. And here's one of the reasons, like I said, why I love the fan brush, because you can really push it up in where this ends and get a nice seal attached right up to where your last attachment was with the napkin decoupage. To press it down, I grabbed my little sponge. This is a dry sponge, and I'm just going to plop it right on down and press the napkin in. It's also going to absorb any Mod Podge that is coming through the napkin, so this way we have a nice little bonded section. Once this dried up a little bit, I decided to just kind of pull off some of our edges where we were putting our popsicle sticks, so this way we could get to business. I painted those a brownish black color and then set them off to the side to dry, and then went ahead and painted all our little lines around our pumpkins here. And I'm taking different colors, really brown, black. You guys probably can't notice on the camera, but I noticed, okay? I noticed. And I decided to do the front pumpkin a brown, and then bring on in a permanent black magic marker to do the lines around the other two pumpkins. For me, I felt like this was just going to give us a little bit more depth with the color variations, and I also felt like I might have made a little bit of a mess if I tried to paint in between these lines. By this time, our little wood pieces are all dried up, so I just lined them right on up where we had them all sectioned off to go. And I do want to quickly say, because I get asked this often, do you go over and seal the decoupage? Yes, but I wait for it to completely dry before I put a layer over top. I trimmed around the popsicle edges to make sure that they were rounded with our little wood round here, and I felt like something was missing. So I grabbed some little trim pieces that I had here. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough. So I had to kind of wing how I wanted this to go. So I put this one on the bottom, and then I took the smaller piece and cut it into two pieces, because I knew I was putting a messy bow on the center of the top of this. So that was going to hang down and cover the fact that we did not have any of the trim. Now you, of course, obviously put two pieces. If I had a long enough piece, I would have just put, to go across the whole thing. But, I didn't have that, so I'm working with what I got here. I was recently sent an awesome little box with a bunch of goodies in it from a subscriber. Thank you very much, Rhonda. And one of the things I talk about very often is I am horrible at bows and etc., etc. So she was kind enough to send me this awesome bag along with a bunch of other stuff that just had cut up little pieces of fabric, which is amazing because my favorite bow is a messy bow. So I schmoozed around in here, grabbing a couple pieces that I thought would look cute with the other pieces that I was going to cut up. I grabbed some Dollar Tree ribbon, I grabbed some burlap, and then I just kind of started pulling each piece on top of each other, and I grabbed a stapler and started stapling them. You guys can always attach, a lot of people use the little wire pieces, the floral wires, but staples work just good for me. And I just started stapling this right in the center. I added a little flower on the top, and I love how this. Even though these welcome tabletop signs aren't that expensive, I still felt like we could remix this using some of Dollar Tree's metal words. You get 3 in a pack, so you really get a little bit of versatility here. If you want to paint these, you absolutely can, but I'm not going to. And I want to show you 2 different ideas for this dupe. One is just to grab a piece of scrap wood. I had this one laying around that had a little dent in it, and our harvest fits in there perfectly. Another, of course, is to use tumbling tower blocks. Are you shocked?
I grabbed my tacky glue and I attached several of the tumbling blocks together until they were the exact length of the little scrap piece that I had on the side, which, in case you're wondering, is 5 tumbling blocks, and you'll need a total of 10, the exact same size. Leave them split apart so they can dry. You can paint these whatever color you want. I'm just going to use some of my black satin multi-surface paints and give these each a nice coat. When they were dry, I grabbed my favorite Gorilla Glue gel, and on the welcome sign that I'm putting in the tumbling tower blocks, I put at the bottom of the front and the back on the farthest sides of the pieces of the words that I knew were going to dip down into the tumbling blocks, along with a little smoosh of glue on each end. I then took a minute putting it right in the spot that made sense, pressing it together, and I grabbed some clamps to help hold it in place for about 20 minutes. Where it gets tricky is if you want to do a piece of scrap wood like I am here with the divot in the center, you're going to need to hold that in place while it dries, or use an accelerator to speed up the drying process. It will absolutely hold, it's just going to require a little bit of patience. For anyone actually questioning whether or not it was holding, I wanted to pick it up and turn it to the side so you can see it's really just the Gorilla Glue gel holding this little metal word into place on here. I got full confidence in my Gorilla Glue gel. If you enjoyed these dupes, check out this video right here for more inspiration. As always, people, thank y'all so much for hanging out with me today, and until next time.